House Speaker Mike Johnson speaking at the U.S.-Mexico border right now regarding that crisis along the border in Eagle Pass, Texas. Let's listen in.
Republicans that have joined us here in Eagle Pass. They represent 26 states, 1 U.S. territory. You have everybody from California to Maryland, from Michigan to Florida. We represent over half the U.S. states because every state in America is now a border state, and we've seen that on vivid display today. Today we were able to meet with local residents, with sheriffs, with the Texas DPS. We also toured the CBP processing facility here in Eagle Pass, and it's been an eye-opener. One thing is absolutely clear. America is at a breaking point with record levels of illegal immigration, and today we got a first-hand look at the damage and the chaos the border catastrophe is causing in all of our communities. The situation here and across the country is truly unconscionable. We would describe it as both heartbreaking and infuriating. Our communities are overrun. We have local resources that are being strapped. We have lethal drugs that are pouring into our country at record levels. And it's in less than 3 years that President Biden took office that this has happened. That we have over 7 million illegal encounters at the border, nearly 2 million known gotaways, and that doesn't count the many that are undetected. At 312 suspects on the terrorist watch list that have been apprehended. We have no idea how many terrorists have come into the country and set up terrorism cells across the nation. Last month alone, we saw the most illegal crossings in recorded history. It is an unmitigated disaster, a catastrophe. And what's more tragic is that it's a disaster of the president's own design. About an hour ago, we had lunch, and there are a number of sheriffs that work and serve here along the border of Texas. The sheriff of Terrell County was one of them. He's a former Border Patrol agent for 26 years, and he said in his estimation, it took less than 6 months for the Biden administration to dismantle 100 years of progress that the U.S. Border Patrol had achieved. Some of the first actions that Joe Biden took when he rolled into the Oval Office were that he rolled back border security measures. They were put in place by the Trump administration. We all saw it happen. Remember, it was on his very first day in office that President Biden stopped construction of the southern border wall, and he ended the Remain in Mexico policy. It was estimated on our tour just a moment ago that if the Biden administration would reinstate just the Remain in Mexico policy, it could stem the flow by probably 70% or more. But he refuses to do it. And since the time that President Biden took office, the administration has done next to nothing to protect the border. But we've all seen with our own eyes, they have opened the border wide to the entire world. It's estimated that nearly 170 countries have people coming in and flowing across this border. And some of these are from nations that have high numbers of concentration. And these are not people who are fleeing and looking for asylum, that are in fear for their lives in their home countries. We have hardened criminals coming across that border. They're the ones being released from prisons from some of these countries and sent here to come into the U.S. Rather than incentivizing people to come, the president needs to deter people from entering the country. Rather than discussing amnesty with Mexico, as top Biden administration officials did within the last couple of weeks, this administration should reinstate the Remain in Mexico policy, as was said. Rather than expanding parole authority to an unprecedented scale, the president should obviously end catch and release and stop the abuse of our parole and asylum systems. The president can and should act now. This doesn't require legislation. It requires leadership. And despite the White House's claim, he has all the authority he needs right now under existing federal law to stop this madness. But the message his policies have sent is the opposite of that. It's quite clear. Under President Biden, America has laid out a welcome mat to illegal immigrants, smugglers, and cartels. He is responsible for the grave threat to our national security and our nation's sovereignty that these policies have created. But instead of taking responsibility and providing leadership, this administration has done nothing but attack elected officials who are trying to fix this catastrophe. The people standing behind you have worked hard. We passed our legislation more than 7 months ago. You have red and blue states all across this country that are being forced to step up because the federal government has failed to do its job. Right here in Texas, Governor Abbott has heroically done more to enforce the law than the president has. And how has this administration responded? They have sued the state of Texas to stop their deterrence efforts. They have brought them to court to strike down their ability to put up buoys in the water and razor wire and the rest. It's absolute insanity. The House has done its job. As I mentioned, we delivered common sense legislation that will secure our border, but it's been sitting on Chuck Schumer's desk for 7 months. House Resolution 2 was our bill, and the time to act on it is yesterday. It certainly needs to happen. With each passing day, each record broken, this administration's dereliction of duty becomes more and more dangerous and more infuriating, and we are here to say that it must stop. What we saw today only made House Republicans more resolved to stand for sanity and the American people, and we will do it. If President Biden wants a supplemental spending bill focused on national security, it better begin by defending America's national security.
Speaker Johnson there, flanked by House Republicans as they hold a press conference on the border crisis there in Eagle Pass, Texas. For more, let's bring in our Jay O'Brien, also former Assistant Secretary for Public Affairs in the Department of Homeland Security, Marcia Espinosa. Marcia, let's start with you. Your reaction to what the Speaker has said so far today, and also his just kind of the blame game that's going on right now between Republican lawmakers and the president.
Yeah, well, look, it's nice that that many Republicans went down to the border to actually see what's happening down there. It's good for both Republicans and Democrats to see what's happening down there. But look, all this is a press conference, because the reality is they didn't need to travel thousands of miles to hold a press conference. All they had to do was pass some of the policies that the administration has been requesting for almost 3 years now. The administration has done everything in its power to secure the border safely and humanely without using the terrible Trump tactics that were cruel and inhumane and frankly didn't work from an operational perspective. But ultimately, Congress has to fix the broken immigration system, and everyone agrees that it is broken and more needs to be done.
So if you were still with the Department of Homeland Security, knowing what you know and going through a number of various crises that we have seen in the border over, the past decade, what would be a handful of suggestions you would make?
Well, so the Biden administration sent over a supplemental request to add more Border Patrol agents, to add more technology to discover fentanyl, which is having a terrible effect on our country. And every time it sent something forward, Republicans said, no thanks, and didn't take any action. We plussed up the number of Border Patrol agents already, but the supplemental request would actually add more. And then meanwhile, we are watching the Senate, along with Secretary Mayorkas, engage in negotiations to try to get something done. And I know that they are looking at asylum reform and other measures that could be taken safely and humanely in order to actually fix the crisis or fix the situation at the border, because by the time people reach our border, it's almost too late. Some of those measures that the Speaker talked about are just really cruel and inhumane and didn't work. We saw them during the Trump administration. They didn't have an effect. And one thing he's not mentioning is during the Trump administration, arrivals went down because of COVID-19, because of Title 42. So ultimately, Congress has to act here to change our very outdated laws that have been broken and haven't been touched for decades.
So, as you heard Jay, Marcia just mentioned asylum policy. All of this is taking place as Congress begins a crucial election year, clearly with a heightened focus on the border. Let's talk about where negotiations are right now in the Senate, relevant to asylum policy and other things that Marcia mentioned.
Yeah, so, and you heard the Speaker reference it, you heard Marcia reference it there as well, which is that the supplemental package that the president requested has funding for Ukraine in it, funding for Israel, funding for border security, as you both just mentioned. And additionally, in that package, Senate and House Republicans said they wanted immigration policy changes put in there as well. Those are the changes to asylum requirements and things of that nature that we're talking about. Those negotiations as to what Republicans and Democrats and the administration, because they're a third party at the table here, can all agree on, those played out remotely over the last few weeks during the holiday into the new year. And then we know that the parties have been meeting in person on Capitol Hill this week, including including today, where Secretary Mayorkas was on Capitol Hill meeting with the various Republican and Democrat point people on this issue. We know that those negotiations are taking place. Other than that, the jury's really out as to what is happening inside that room. You ask 5 people in Washington what's happening in those negotiations, you'll get 5 different answers because nobody really knows. They've been very tight-lipped. They haven't even filled in the various other senators here. We don't have anything on paper as the product of those talks yet. Congress returns next week, so we're hoping to see when Congress returns what kind of progress has been made, if any.
Jay, Marcia Espinosa, thank you both so much.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.